This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone, so very warm welcome to the next session on SAP Cloud Platform Integration Suite. So let's just quickly look at what we have discussed in our last session. From there only we'll just take it forward. So I think yesterday's our session was more about revisiting what concepts we have learned about the mapping part. Okay, so first we started with with talking about what we have learned in the message mapping, how did we do simulate, what are the different kind of node function, then we started looking into the script part of it. So now how in your message mapping, if we have to write a custom script, might be a basic one to read your header and property, how to do that particular part. So I think that's the first topic we started with. Let me just quickly open the system also parallelly. So let me just quickly go to the package. Let me go to that particular indication flow as such. Yeah, so what we tried was we did try it for your reading an order number from your header and property. So I now assume that people now know how to first of all create your functions. Okay, now in case if you want to define anything, you can just quickly go there, you can just edit your script, and might be whatever the logic you required, you can do that particular part. So for our case, I think it was a very simple. So we have to import the library, then we have to just write get header message. Okay, so which is going to read actually the header from that particular variable whichever we have defined. In our case it was order, so it will read and it will actually return that particular value. So this is, I think, the first thing what we have discussed. Second thing, again, I think it was very straightforward. Second thing, we discussed about how to set up your SAP ES5 system. So I think the advantage of it is you can just have a real-time feel. How does your, in case if you're consuming an OData service, how does it look like? That's the second part of it. Third part of it is now might be in case if anytime you want to go deeper into your API management concepts where you see how does your API part works out. Okay, in that particular case also this particular concept is bit helpful as such. Okay, because you might connect to your SAP API gateway and then might be can expose outside of it also. So I would highly encourage you to set up your or get your user registered for ES5 system as such. I think the third thing what we started with, I think that was quite critical. I think we started discussing about your standard prepackaged content. Okay, so we discussed about how do we actually start with getting your standard prepackaged content, and I think we just talked about one very basic use case where you just need to configure. So when I say the word configure, so you just have to configure your endpoint for your sender and receiver system, and that particular case is like your what should I say, the vanilla case. Okay, so in that particular case you don't need any kind of enhancement, only the information which is there in the standard iflow is sufficing your use case. So that's the first part. Second thing we discussed about that, now let's say if we have a use case where we need to enhance it. So we just take an example of C4C integration with SAP S4HANA. So we did look into multiple your artifacts like your sales code, customer, product. So here we have noted some interesting thing. Now SAP has given something called your post exit. Okay, so when I say the word post exit, it should give you an analogy like your what we used to have your body in on-premise. Okay, so that's your enhancement spot. So same way in your CPI. Now let's say in case if you want to change some kind of a mapping logic. Okay, so let me just quickly show that particular part. Okay, I think this is the one which we were talking about. Now let me just go to the artifacts here. So now in this particular case, let me just take an example of your sales code or anything. Okay, so now let's in case if we have this use case where we want to create a code follow-up document in SAP Business Suite. Okay, so now once we go into this, so what we discussed here. So now let's say if I click on configure, first of all, I have an option here where I can define if there is an extension required. Okay, if you remove this false indicator, if you just put it true, so what will happen is in this router, a decision will take, and this will just take this route instead of directly passing this message to your receiver system. So in post processing, I have talked that there will be a local integration process call. Here we have a process direct adapter which can call a separate iflow where it's going to read or whatever the enhancement you want to do in your message mapping, and based on the result of it, what it's going to do is it's just going to pass that particular message to the receiver system. So there is a two advantage of this having your exit. First of all, you have now control in the standard iflow, and the second part important is without touching it. Okay, so now in case if there is any kind of update comes into this specific iflow, so you don't have to make any kind of a changes. So that's an important part to it, and I think I've given you a very good example that these examples of iFlow or your business use cases where we're just talking about order code pricing, in that particular cases it becomes very very important, because when we're talking about cloud, the functionality changes drastically. Okay, for few of the scenarios. So in case if you just try to adapt into your CPI, it becomes little tough as such. So again, anytime in case if you have this kind of requirement, I think definitely you should first look for exit. If there is any kind of exit which is available in your iFlow and then might be based on the exit available, then I think it should be pretty easy for you. So I've already talked about that particular part. You can just download your mapping, your whatever the files you have it, or the enhanced files you have got from the developer of corresponding sender and receiver system. And then what you have to do is you can just in your through your process direct adapter play around that transformations and then just pass back the response back. So this is what we have talked in our standard prepackaged content. Okay, and I don't think so there is a much complexity you get in the standard prepackaged content. Most of the time I think it suffices your process. So this is the third topic we discussed. I think the last topic what we discussed about the externalized parameters. So I hope, and I think I've just given the small example. Let me just quickly go back there. I think what we just talked about an externalized parameter is, so now let's say whenever we're just talking about configurations, okay, so whenever we are doing mostly con when I configuration I mean connecting two systems, okay, so always your sender receiver systems or your host details will be different based on the landscape you have it. So whenever SAP is also releasing any kind of their iFlow, so they have to just keep it very generic, okay, so that people can easily fix or pass their host details. So in case if you look at for standard, I have talked yesterday for that every iFlow, I think you will have this configure option where you can actually pass the different kind of a settings. So same way, I think we can also enable it out for the custom iFlow, because once they are passed to from let's say development to quality or quality to production, so might be we need to change the details. Okay, I know for custom iflows we do have a lot of flexibility, but if you just talk about standard, I think that's a way forward. So now in this particular case, now let me, I hope this is the one where we have just configured yes perfect. So I think last you have seen that how easy it is to parameterize your iflow. So how to do that particular part, let me just quickly go on to one of the iflows. So here what we have done is once I click on edit here, okay, I think, okay. So now anytime in case if you select any kind of a channel or any kind of a content modifier, not everywhere externalize is supported because it does not make sense. So now let's say in case if I want to externalize it or parameterize it, so I have this option available in my adapter on top right for all the properties. Once you click on this particular part, so you will have all the variables which you can actually parameterize it. So just to remember that particular part, in case if you have to parameterize any variables, you have to part double flower brackets, give any name, and then you have to close by double flower bracket only. Okay. So in case if you want to pass multiple parameters, so you have to just give two parameters for the same. This is how you do parameterized. I think I've just talked about host port details at the receiver side in case you have to pass multiple variables or multiple attributes or parameters. Now again, I've just talked about here on the externalized parameter, we have tab which is available on the integration flow. Now let's in case if we want to see which are the default values or a configure valued. Okay, so now let's in case if any one of you has configured an iFlow, let's say there are 20, 25, 30 variable, you don't want to go from there. I think it's all about way to look at things. Might we can just come inside the iFlow, you go to externalized parameter, and then you will be able to see what are the default values and what are the configured values of your iFlow as such. So guys, this is what we have discussed whole and whole about your these four topics. Any kind of a question, anyone as such? Any point here?
Not from my end.
Perfect. Okay. So guys, again, as we have few of the topics planned for today also, let me first just quickly discuss about the topic and then we can start jumping into it. I think the first one is about the Groovy script. I think there are use cases where you want to read directly the XML into your script part. Okay. Now might be you can have a structure and might be you can have a list. So how to do about that particular part? What are the different kind of extensions which are available in your Chrome store for your SAP CPI and what kind of advantage this extensions bring in. Second part, we would be talking about your SAP Cloud Connector. Third part, we would be talking about, I think we have something called your data stores. We have your global variable. After that, we would be talking about API management. Then we would be talking about your performance part. Okay, so I hope these are the target topics for today, and whatever we are able to complete today we'll be completing, and then might we will just go next week whatever is the remaining one. But I'm sure by next week we should be able to finish this particular course. One thing as I want to assure you, it's not that once we have done the course part, so yeah, the contact or in case you have any kind of questions, so I'll say no, or if there is anything, I'm happy to discuss it out. Okay, so generally I keep one follow-up session. I think very few people comes to it. So now let's say in case you finish the course by 9, just take your time. Anywhere around between 23rd or 24th, I would be setting up a call based on any kind of a queries. Okay, so in case if you feel like Sam, we do have queries from our side and we want to get it answered, might be a quick, I think, a call for everyone together only, because then everyone can just hear what kind of questions people have. So based on that, I'll be having it, but you have to just mail me of that. Okay, Sam, what kind of questions we have? If there is just only one or two people question, then I can just take, I think, in a quickly only in one-to-one call. Okay, so that is very very important. Now coming to the topic of your Groovy script here, and I'm sure everyone would be asking, Sam, what is left out into the Groovy script? It's just a quick thing. How many of you feel now you do understand a basic of Groovy script in your SAP CPI? Or is there anyone who feel like, Sam, I am still not clear with the Groovy script? Any one of you? Okay. So now I'm assuming here, I think people do understand the basic part of a Groovy. So now, what was our last understanding, or what kind of a things we have done? I think the first step we did was unlocking. Okay, so we did logging of payload. Okay, so that was our first step. We did it. Okay, and we was able to actually record a step. We know, I think the technical reason was that in a production system you cannot enable a trace. This will make a better sense. Yeah, that's plus one to this. Now, one more thing, guys, before I go into the scripting part, I just want to tell you the new feature. So now, anytime, okay, if I go on to one of the iFlows, let's say, which is deployed. So here you see, sorry, just to come directly here. So now SAP has given you a new functionality I just want to talk about. I think the trace word has given me that kick, that just to talk about it and how new features come up here. So now there is a new option SAP has enabled, which is error. So now let's in case if you if you enable the error part, so it's going to specifically log that error information more detail as such. Okay, so this is a new feature SAP has released. So I'm sure going forward every then and now 1 month 2 months you would be seeing some kind of interesting functionalities here. Okay, coming back to your Groovy script here. Now logging of payload was one. I think second what we did was reading your header and your property variable. Guys, header and property variables are critical, and the reason is sometimes it can be used to save some kind of important values, might be to reuse at later step, or to define some kind of a logic, might be in your router conditions, or how do we do a splitter, or might be we are using any kind of adapter. So header property you've seen even into the mail adapter part, so it's very very critical. So reading header and property in Groovy's script sometimes becomes important, because maybe you want to write your if you want to write logic based on that part. So this is we have seen. I think then we have seen the open source Groovy ID tool. Okay, so where you can actually check or look into your errors part. Okay, because now we don't have any kind of error check, or your any kind of syntax check we don't have as such in standard into SAP CPI tool. So we just talked about this Groovy ID, and we talked about some kind of open examples placed there. So you might can just go through it. Then I think the fourth use case what we have talked about is how to add custom headers, which helps you in monitoring of messages. Okay, so this is the I think the fourth part. I think we have just looked into it, how to actually work with that particular part. Again, I think this was very very critical. So now I think the last part in the Groovy script is, now let's say in case if you want to directly read your XML payload. Okay, in case you want to directly read an XML payload into the script, how to do that particular part, because for this we need to actually parse that particular syntax. So there are two kind of payload you can just think of. One is a structure, where when I say the structure, might be you just have a single payload which will be hitting it, or it can be a list of records, list of orders. Now let's say hits into system, and now might be I want to manipulate routes. Again, I think that's a very common use case. Now how to actually look into this particular part? Let me just quickly go into the system. Guys, I hope we are clear with the use case, what kind of a use case we are discussing here. Anyone, any kind of a question?
Nope.
Okay, thanks, Q. Now I think in this particular case, I'm just going to directly place my script here. Now let's say if I'm just talking about my payload, I think I can just take straightforward for this particular example only, where I'm just sending this order details as such. Okay, so now might be, now let's say in case if I want to change onto the currency part. So now let's say whatever the request coming out, instead of passing USD, I need to convert into your INR. Again, I'm sure people would ask, Sam, this will be easy through mapping. So yeah, I think definitely that's easy through mapping, but that's just a use case how to actually use or how to actually parse your syntax. So in this particular case, what I'm gonna do is just on the interest of time also, let me just quickly click on create. So now I think I have this written here. I'll just quickly pass it here and then I'll just talk about the syntax of it. Okay. So now what I am just doing here is, again, I think it's very straightforward, but I think there are a few things which is new required here. Yeah. Now let's in case if I have to parse your XML input so that I can actually parse that particular text, and might be once I'm able to parse it and I'm able to do the message whatever the logic is required, and then again create into the similar format and pass it back. So what I have to do is I have to use some kind of libraries here. Okay, so I think these two libraries, I think we have just already seen it. So there is a one specific library we need for parsing, which is your XML util. Okay, and then again for again let's say creating it out, the payload. Okay, we need something called a streaming markup builder. Again, I think it's very difficult because now again I think this particular CPI is again based on your Apache Camel framework. You cannot just directly go and look into your Apache Camel framework libraries that okay what fits best into it, because again SAP has written their own wrappers top of it. Okay, so sometimes definitely you have to see onto standard. If you go to SAP CPI help portal or that on the documentation part, somewhere you have different kind of a library. So I'll just do one thing. I'll just give you 15 or 20 library statements are there. You can just just avail in your script, and I think then you should be good enough as such. Okay, so mostly people do that particular part. Whatever the maximum libraries they have it, they just keep it into their script as such in starting. So now here, once we have this available libraries, again I think it's very straightforward. You know how to define message. You know this process data will be the first method. Input will be a message. I am just going to do some one simple thing. I'm just going to read my body as a string into this particular variable body. I am just going to parse the body as such, okay, so that I can actually play around with it, because this is your tagged data, whatever the XML input it comes out. So here you have to define a variable. I have defined a variable here, root. I have take an object of slurper and I've used the method parse text. I'm going to parse my body. So in this root, now I have the complete structure. Now let's say in case if I want to set the value of any of the variables instead of currency, if you want to play around with any of the things, might be your order, customer, anything, or might be any kind of computation you want to do based on, let's say, order amount and country, you want to calculate how much will be your, let's say, taxes, and you can just pass that particular value also on the runtime. So everything can be achieved here as such. Now once I have done this particular parts, what I'm gonna do here is I have set this particular value. Then again I have to actually build an output. So now it's like I'm not sure if that's like your perfect recipe. Now let's, in case if you have any kind of a laddu, I'm sure everyone else do understand that particular bit. Now let's, in case if you have to break that first laddu, okay, then might be you want to add additional thing. Okay, you mix again and then again you have to make it into the similar shape so that it I can actually, or it can be passed out. So similar scenario we have it. We first pass that XML input. We make a change whatever based on our use case. Then again we are going to define a streaming markup builder. Okay, again this line is very straightforward standard. Okay, so first I'm going to create an object for your markup builder, which is my output builder. Here I'm going to use output builder dot bind method, and I have to pass mkp dot yield and then whatever the object we have. In our case, it's root because it has the body. And then what I'm gonna do back is I'm just going to set the message with that result, and then I'm just going to return this particular message outside. So now what we can do is we can just quickly check. We can just quickly click on OK. Let me do a save and let me just do a deploy here. Okay, so this is what we do for parsing your XML text. Okay, play around with it, and then again just uh, creating the output and setting it to the body and then returning into the message. So this is the few steps what we do. So once you have done this particular part, now let's look at how this particular message look like. Let me, okay, I think this particular message is starting, or if we can just go to the deployment status here. So I think it's starting. Let's just wait for 2-3 minutes more. Okay, now I think this is deployed. So let me just quickly go to the navigate to the indication content. So I'm just gonna do quickly one thing. So now I think once we have submitted our request, now you see I think the currency has been changed. So in case if I just go here, I go to the monitor messaging part. Let me just quickly go to the trace bit here. So if you just look at a step before your script, when you get your message content, okay, so you have the currency, and then if I just go to the end part, if I go to the message content, if you look at, I think this will be changing your currency to the USD part. Now just a quick question to you guys. Now, what do you think in case if we just try to test the same thing using your template button? Do you think it will work out? Is there anyone who think okay this will not work out? Any one of you?
Come again, what's your question?
I'm saying now, let's say instead of now sending a request from a SOAP tool, now let's say if I want to test using a simulate feature here into the CPI, what do you think? Do you think it will work out or it will remain the same? Or you're going to get the same response?
It will work out.
Okay, so now let's just quickly try out this particular part. So now here I'm just gonna put the start. Here I'm just going to put the stop. I'm just going to the start button again.
No, 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 no. We need to
Ah, I
put
have
the
to. No,
content
I know. No,
content modifier.
no.
We need to put the content modifier as a. Then this XML should be put as the body of this content modifier. After that, you can do that.
No, 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 man. Let me just show you. Let me just show you. Give me a second. So I don't think so. You need any kind of anywhere content modifier necessary. So you can just put your whatever the tag you had. So now in this particular
Oh
case,
yes, yes, yes. Right.
so you have your content. I think the only thing is you cannot. You have to be in non-edit mode as such. Okay. So if you're in edit mode, then you will not be. Sometimes you don't get the part. So now let's say if you have a simulation start, so you have simulation end. If I start my run simulation, so now what will happen is based on this particular process, once you will see, okay, so if I go here on to the end part, I'll just click on the message packet. If I just go here into the body, you will see the currency has been changed to INR. Okay, guys, honestly now, supposedly what happens is previously I think this was not working it out. I think that was the reason because then I'm also a bit surprised now. Earlier when you test this particular feature onto a script, specifically this feature where we are playing with an XML payload, it does not work out. But today I think it's working, so I think it's a good thing. Okay, logical. That's the advantage of having a simulate step here, but it's a good news. I was expecting it will not work out, so I just want to give the clear message that whenever you're testing your feature, you simulate and it's not working it out, you are 100% sure what you have written is right. Might be you can just simulate a request from the outside also just to validate it out. So that was the point I was about to make it here. But that's good in case it's working it out here. Now this is my first case what we have discussed. Okay, so now second part is we are going to talk about the list of records. Again, I think things remain the same for my list of record also. So now let's say I'll go back again to my script. So I'll just share the script details with you. So now again, I think everything remains the same. I just have to enable a loop as such here. That's it, nothing else. This particular piece remains the same. Reading or parsing your body remains the same. Only when you have list of records, you just have to use a loop here. I'm just going to copy again this particular message here. Okay, and I am just going to keep it like this. Okay, so now again, it's pretty much the same. I'm just going to read the body, parse the text, get into this variable root. So now the root contains my list of records. So now how here your loop works. So you have row, okay, like so now let's say if you have this 2 3 rows here. Okay, so this is like we have 3 orders here, and then row would be pointing it out to my first record as such here. This is record this is record 1, this is record 2, this is record 3. Okay, so these are the 3 records I have. So when I say for uh, we are defining a variable row and column, then root dot orders. So root will point to first record and the column orders here. Root dot orders to that order list as such. Okay, so once it points to this record, what will happen is now step by step it will go inside this record. So first it's going to read root dot currency, then second, then third. That's how your loop works out here. Might be mostly you have used loop in a different way, but here you just define a variable colon and that table it points to. Okay, so then variable will have complete row will have a complete structure of this record as such here. Okay, so that's how it does work. Then here I'm just setting it out the currency field again. any logic you want to write it, guys. Again, I think it's straightforward. I just want to show you how does loop works, how does your slurper parts the text, and then how do we actually form the message back again into the structure, into the same way. So this is how it works out, and once we are done with this particular part, I'll just click on OK. I'm going to again click on save, and I'm going to quickly click on deploy as such again here. Let's wait for it to get it deployed. Let me just go here. I think this is deployed. Okay, let's wait for it to get deployed.
Sam, how many session is remaining?
I think maximum one more will have it.
So we covered all the topics.
Mostly yes. So now here in this particular case, now what I have to do is I have to pass a list of records. Let me just quickly go here. So we have here send order list. Let me see if there is any kind of a structure which is available here. Okay, I think this is now here. If you just look at, so here we have a list of orders. Okay, so we have here your 101, 102, 103, 104. So now here I'm gonna pass, I think my endpoint. I'm going to submit this request. Logically, I think this also works out. So now here, in case if you want to validate here, so you can see, I think the currency everywhere has been changed. So guys, this is how you should be able to work with your parsing your XML payload. Now let's in case if you directly want to play around in the script part. So this is how you play around uh, with the parsing in your Groovy script. Again, this is helpful, so I'll just do one thing. I'll just share the script with you because that last steps were pretty much standard as such. Okay. Initially, I think when I was trying to fix this particular part initially in 2017-18, it actually took me time because there was nothing available as such, or how to actually form back and set into body and then pass or return the message. Okay, so this becomes little important that step. So any questions here as such, guys? Any question, anything you want to discuss?
Yeah, some if there is a complex record, for example, record inside a record, in that case, how do you handle this using this previous script?
Can you give me some kind of example that might be I can just think of and I can just
For
come back
example,
because
let's say, for example, in this case, currency as a node, it is going to be used as a node. Inside this
mm-hmm,
currency, there is another structure. Okay,
okay, mm-hmm.
that structure having, for example, currency one one element called currency one, and that is containing the value of the currency. In case in that case, we want to change that currency one field. How do you handle that?
So I think again that's very straightforward. I think in case if instead of using a loop, then in case if that's a structure, then I'm going to use an if statement. Okay, I'm just going to check now. Let's say if your orders, or might be I can just do one thing. Is it just a structure, or is it like a list of records? Let's say if it's now you're talking about one order, it has that node of currency, and that one it has a field, or you're talking about list of orders and every order has that particular node.
Yeah,
Now, which
I'm
scenario
just
are you talking about? You're talking about first scenario, second scenario here?
in second scenario. Take the second scenario, because if second scenario is going to be handled, then you can handle the first scenario.
See, again, I think for second scenario also it is easy. I think first definitely you have to use a loop because if there are multiple records, you have to go one by one. Okay. So now let's say in case if you have your first scenario, second scenario, first you are going to enable it here. You have to enable a loop. You will first read the first records. So once now I have control like with row of record one. Okay, so now complete structure is with row variable here, whatever we have defined. Okay, so I'm just going to access row dot that particular node, row dot pricing dot currency. Okay, and then I'm going to set it as a USD, so or INR
Okay.
single quote. Okay,
Okay. Mm.
so that's
Okay.
how.
Okay.
So that's how. So here, what you just have to do this way. It's a simple only. I think one script you have to write it out. Once you have written, then you will be able to relate it out. Okay, so both cases it's easy only. You have to just reach till that record, and then might be with dot statement. Then you will be able to progress as such here. Okay,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you. Anyone else? Any kind of a question? Okay, guys. Now I'll talk about one last part here. Okay. Again, I think this topic last batch someone asked. Okay, then I started looking into it. So now when we're just talking about extension, so here I mean Chrome extension, okay, which is like your extension which are built on your SAP CPI tool. Okay, so now let me just quickly go here. So now in this particular case, now there are some kind of extensions which is available here into your SAP CPI. Let me just go here. Okay, so there are different kind of extensions which are available on your SCP. So now let me just talk about one or two extensions. I think there are different kind of extensions. If you'll ask me, Sam, is this is something good? We can use it out. I'll just talk about one specific. I think this is the one extension which is your MDP Group Super Easy extension for SAP CPI. Now, definitely, in case you will ask me what kind of advantages bring, I think it's always go to on the features part because every then and now they are changing it out. Okay, or new features are added here. So for us, I think the story started with this part, Groovy syntax checker. So in case if you enable this particular, I think extension, then you will be able to actually check your Groovy syntax. Okay, so this is straightforward available on your tool only. Let me just go there. I think they have, yeah, here. Okay, so now in case if you write your structure, you will see that how it has shown the error here. Okay, so this is advantages bring, but I think there is a disadvantage to it also, because in case if you connect your SAP CPI to this plugin, so what will happen is it will ask your credentials, and sometimes it actually exposes your data. Okay, so you have to be very smart about it. Okay, that how do you want to actually use your extension, or in case if you don't want to use this particular extension, but there are different kind of functionality, and you never know if this fits, might be if gives you quick help. Okay, so now again here this is the first one, which is your CPA helper offered by, okay, might be this is some company I haven't heard about it. So Okay, it is. So here we have the features. Design improvement sidebar with processed messages. Activate inline trace to see message route to integration flow designer. And then we have button to switch on traced, directly go to traces of specific message. So, and we have this list of functionalities available. But please make sure that security is one very critical thing here. So I think based on your requirement, you can explore it. But yeah, again, purely on your I think from a security perspective. Okay. And I think the last one is this. I'm sure this is a new one which has been enabled. Okay, this is extension open the wind message to or any URL in the SAP tenant domain. Okay, so again, I think this is something new which is published. Let me see when this is published. My 7. Okay, I've not heard about it, but yeah, I think these are the three plugins which are available. Yep. Any questions here on the extensions part? Okay, cool. So now, guys, I'll just do one thing. I'll jump onto SAP Cloud Connector. Guys, anyone has heard about Cloud Connector, or why does it need, or might you have used in your use case, but you're not sure that how or what kind of a purpose it has? Does anyone has come around this particular part, SAP Cloud Connector?
Yes, I have heard of it.
Yes, Sam.
Okay, did you get a chance to work into it, into your Cloud Connector as such?
Mainly, I have used for building UI5 app where I have connected with my on-premise system and getting the O data from it.
Perfect. Okay, got it. So now, guys, what happens is now let me just take an example here. Now, guys, when I am talking about our day-to-day use cases, okay, so what we were talking about, we are sending a request from a cloud system, it going to CPI, it going to send a request to S4, and it's going to pass your record back. Okay. But now you have to understand here one important thing. Your S4 system or your ERP system is a very critical system because it contains a lot of important financial information, order related details, so which is quite critical for any kind of organization. Now what happens is anytime if you want to post data from outside, from like let's say from your outside, from your SAP S4 system to might be any kind of a cloud system. So now let's say, okay, sorry, I think this is a bit big here. So now when I'm just talking about this kind of use cases where data is coming out of the S4 system, I think it's quite easy. Okay, there is a no hard rush because data is being exposed outside. Okay, I'm sure there is a nature of trust between different systems. But whenever we are talking about posting a record, okay, so now let's say if I'm just talking about posting a record. When I'm talking about posting a record into your S4 system, it's not that straightforward. Okay, because no one exposes their S4 system directly. Okay, so they it's not like that they just expose their host details to the outside world and say, okay, whatever the request we have, you can actually send it here. Okay, that's does not it's not work out in that particular way, because in case if you're talking about your on-premise time, so we used to have the concept of a reverse proxy, DMZ zones, all the requests used to end at one place, and then might be it'll actually it'll actually pass it to the system. So now same here, what happens is So we have something called your cloud connector. Again, so whenever I'm just talking about the word cloud connector, again, it's a software piece of component which is installed on your on-premise. Okay, so this is your SCC, which is your SAP Cloud Connector. It behaves like a reverse proxy. Okay, when I say the word reverse proxy, so what happens is now this will actually behave in place of this particular server. So now what will happen is anytime if you have to post a record, so you will be passing your information to this SAP Cloud Connector host details, and it will actually take care to pass the record into the S4 part. So S4, this SAP Cloud Connector becomes very important piece. Okay, because due to this only you are not exposing your main host details, you are just passing SEC details, and when the request hits into the SEC, it knows where it has to pass it out, and it gives the security of your on-premise system also. Okay, because it's not exposed, so there are no so there should not be any kind of instances where we pass some kind of a bogus request which can might behave like your a hacking attack into the system. But now what happens is initially when I used to myself, I think when I heard first time SAP Cloud Connect, I used to think this is some kind of cloud piece of component again might be, but when I got a chance to really get into this particular part because I've done it like from scratch end to end, then I realized no, this is like an on-premise component only, but the request will be routed through this piece of component. Now, I think the most important question comes out is how to actually start with this particular part. So I'm sure most of the people who are working with with the cloud-based applications, okay, it is tools.hana. Okay, so now we have SAP has given some I think URL which is your tools. I think this is a link for your development tools. It's your tools.hana.ondemand.com. So I'm sure you, in case if you're building any kind of a web-based application or doing something on cloud, so there are different kind of installation you might need to do it. Okay, so at this particular place, if you come, you should be able to download this your specific things. Now here we have this different tab. We have cloud and we have your cloud integration. So now in case if you look at for cloud integration, I'm not sure how many of you know, if you talk about early 2015, 16, 17. Oh no, I think it's close 2013 till 15 only. Instead of what we have here, Web ID, earlier we used to have a Eclipse tool where we used to model our iFlow. After that only, I think SAP has bring this persona or this UI where we have started designing our iFlows as such. Okay, so we used to come here, we used to download it also. I think it's a long back part, but I think this is again still used for your DS part. Now here, what I am looking very specific is into the cloud tab. But here again, you have different kind of options related to IDM, ML Foundation, mobile, or your SAP UI5 here. Now, if I go to the cloud part and if I look for SAP Cloud Connector, so here you will see this information. Now again, we have this component or a quick description. SAP Cloud Connector is an optional on-premise component that is needed to integrate on-demand application with a customer backend service and is a counterpart of your SAP connectivity service. So it's not only when it says the option, I think you have there are different ways to connect it. I think when I'm talking about SAP CPI, I think Cloud Connector goes very well as such. Okay. So earlier we used to have the concept of like a reverse proxy. It's very similar to that part only, but there are other options too. But this I can say with CPI, I think Cloud Connector goes very well. Now here we have the documentation about it. Now in case if you want to download into your local machine also, you can do that particular part here. So here it just talk about your documentation. Okay, it just talk about uh, okay content scenarios, what to do for the installation part. So here if you just look at the prerequisite, so it will just talk about for prerequisite what different kind of things you need it out. Okay, So same thing, what I have done is I have just kept into this particular document here, which just talks about bit of theoretical, how does your landscape used to be, how do we do with the help of your cloud connector, everything I have just talked about here in this document also. Now I think the main important thing comes is, now once you have go to tools.hana.onlyone.com, you have already downloaded your cloud connector. If you have installed it out, then what you have to do is you have to go to this particular URL. So I have actually installed into my machine only. It is localhost colon 8443. Okay, so you can also install in your machine as such. No one is stopping you out as such here. Just do remember that when first time you're setting up your first time when you install or you download this particular setup and you go to localhost colon 8443, this is default username and this is a default password. Make sure that this is a case sensitive, so make sure a put capital and here in manage pass the same format. And once you initial login, it will ask you to change the password also. Okay, so this remains the same. Now I'll actually do one thing. I'll just try to log in here into the application with the same credentials. Okay, so this is how my SAP Cloud Connector screen look like. But I'm sure you would be asking, Sam, now what will be doing this of standalone this Cloud Connector? What exactly has to be done it here? So now to make this connectivity of this Cloud Connector, okay, I have to go to your SAP BTP and I have to make it connect to my Cloud Connector to a specific sub account. Does anyone remember it? Initial days, I think initial days when I was taking you to the BTP, where we have seen the where we have seen the SAP Cloud Connector. Any one of you? Any guesses as such?
So we have like in the we have menu like okay.
Sorry, sorry, come again. I'm missing you.
I think we have on a BTP account, right? Where we have to configure. There is a the global and the sub account rolling. Sub account.
Mhm. Perfect, perfect, good. I think people just will remember that particular part. So I think that's a good part. So let me again just to show this how does that work end to end. So now let me just go to account.hana.ondemand.com. I hope I have an access for the sub account. Okay, perfect. I think whenever in case now let's say in case if I have to connect to this particular sub account. So now now I hope you remember here we have this connectivity. In connectivity we do have this cloud connector available. Now let's say in case if I have to connect my SAP cloud connector to this specific sub account. So what you have to do is, so in this particular case what I'm gonna do here is I am actually going to connect this. So does anyone remember that what can I pass here into the sub account detail? What should I pass here for the sub account? Should I pass this or what should I pass it?
Technical name. I need to pass the technical name. We need to pass the technical.
Perfect, perfect. So now for every sub account, if you go to the overview page, at bottom we have this technical name. Okay, so I can just copy this particular technical name. I can pass into this sub account. Now here I think this is also one important thing, which is your region. So you have to just make sure that you give the right region. In case if you're not sure which is the region here, I think just go a step back in that particular breadcrumb. It will actually talk about where this region of that particular sub account is. I think it's Australia AP1. I think I just saw that part. Let me just quickly check that bit, because once I click onto the region, so it will just show me all the different kind of regions which are available. So if I go here, so this is your Australia Sydney region as such. So I'm going to choose this one. I'm going to connect my S account, whatever the user you have it, and once you have just provided all these details, just click on the save part. And just you see, once you define a connector here, so it will get automatically, it's been added here in your sub account. So I'll just click on the save bit here. So now here you will see that this is able to connect. Okay. So now here when I say it able to connect, so now if I just go here onto my sub account, now again if I go here onto the cloud connector, you will see that my machine is being connected here as such. Okay, so now this is how you will be able to establish connectivity of your cloud connector to this particular BTP sub account. Now there are a few more important things which we have to understand. I think here we are able to make a connectivity. Now here it will just talk about directions. Cloud to on-premise, on-premise to cloud. Mostly I think you'll have a case to cloud to on-premise. Now you just heard me, what I said, that your host main server detail is not exposed, but we have this piece of component, so request will be hitting into this SCC, and from this it will be routed it out. Okay, so now what will happen is, first of all, on cloud to on-premise, you have to define your mapping of your virtual to your internal host. So now let's say if I here say for my SCC, the details are like whatever we want to give, virtual virtual system colon anything, you can just define your port, and then might be your, sorry, and then you have your main host details, which might be your AHP 285 colon, then your 8080, anything you can just pass it out. Now here, first of all, we have to define that particular mapping here. So I'll just click on this particular plus. So first of all, there are different kind of a system we have it. Might be people might be need to connect to different systems. So you can do that particular part. Whenever you're talking about any kind of OData service which is being exposed, I think in that particular case you have to choose a SAP gateway system. I haven't seen much use case of a non-SAP system. Now let's in case if we have a backend and then a web system. I'm going to take that particular use case. I'm just going to click on next protocol. You have HTTP, HTTPS, RFC, RFCNS, SNC. I'm going to choose HTTP. I'm just going to define the internal host. So this internal host is important. Why? Because this is the system which is actually the backend one. Okay. So now let's say if I say AHP 263, whatever the internal host you have it, I think you can just go into your system details. You can find that particular part. Port is like 8080, whatever I've just given this particular screenshot. I'll go to the next. Now this part is important. So it says it is recommended to use a virtual naming that is different from internal name, because now I have to mask my on-prem this internal host details. So logically you can just give any name. So now whatever we have given here, let's say VHS, I'll just give a name, same name, for example, VHS, and here the port is your 8054. Okay, so now I have just given a different virtual host and virtual host name, because outside this details will be exposed. I'll click on next. Principal type currently I'll just keep it none. Next, host in request. Whenever the host you need to pass what you want to pass it out, virtual host or internal host. Anytime if you're making this kind of settings in cloud connector, be very smart about it. If you're making a virtual, then yeah, just remember that you have to give virtual host details. Okay, so people just choose it randomly, but there is a logical sense to it. So I'll suggest you use virtual host description, whatever you want to pass it out. You click on next, then you click on finish, and then your system is being added here. Now let's say anytime from SAP CPI you want to send a request to S4 system, might be accessing any resource. You have the server details, but do remember that if we have this configuration done in Cloud Connector, you need to pass this host details. So wherever you have host and port this, first of all make sure that these host and port details are passed, because now request is going to route it through your SAP Cloud Connector. So this is an important part here. So I don't have a real-time system as such here. In any time, I think this how it works out. It's very straightforward. One time you will be able to do it. Then yeah, I think it should be easy. Then you have here check availability tab here. Now in case you want to edit, delete everything, you can just do it here. So once you click on this check availability part, what it does, it just try to make a connection. Okay, so this becomes little important. Mostly once it's successful process, it comes here successful. Okay, and in case, sorry, it comes as reachable, green color, reachable as such. So currently yes, because we this is like some dummy details we have passed out here. Now this tab is one of the most important tabs, because now let's say for this particular internal host, what are the resources we want to access it out. So if I just click on plus, I'll ask, now let's say there are different kind of path, let's say SCP, BC, SRT, and then some specific service or resource you want to expose, you can do that particular part. Okay. Um, so you can just do that particular part. If you have any specific resource, you can do that particular part. You can just clearly mention path only, subpaths are excluded, paths and subpaths. So you have to very clearly tell here. Okay. In case if this is a test system, just put, I think, star only. I think in case you put star only, or I think the forward slash. I think if you put forward slash or SAP and you put path and also path, I think in SICF node, there's a node in SICF and your SAP on premise, then whatever it's enabled or whatever the resources you have below that particular part, you will be able to actually access it out. So that's, you can actually do it here. Okay, so this is how you make this cloud connector enable, link it to your host account, make mapping, and expose your resources. Again, I think it's pretty easy to delete or to add, I think, based on what kind of authorization you have. Okay, and anytime now, let's say if someone has by mistake connected to your, good part is you first of all see here that your host exposed backend system details are being added here. Okay, so whatever we have we have mentioned here into the system. And now let's say in case if you think, okay, someone by mistake has connected it out, so even from your BTP account you can just quickly click on force disconnect. So I think everything kind of access is with available with you. If you want to delete this part, so yeah, everything is possible here as such. Perfect. uh, any questions here, guys,
So
on
connecting,
cloud connect?
yeah, connecting from cloud connected to on-premise system. So for that, do we need a firewall to be open between cloud connector and on-premise system, Sam?
I think cloud connector, the word, don't confuse the word with the word cloud. As I mentioned, SAP Cloud Connector is an on-premise component which you need
On-premise.
to install in the same landscape where your on-premise is. Okay. The
Okay,
only the difference is the request has to route it through it. So that's it, nothing else.
got it.
So now in case if you want to force disconnect, you can just quickly click on force disconnect, and from here it will be actually disconnected. Okay, so yeah, I think it took me some time, but I think this blocks was pretty helpful. I know initially this will be a pain to go through this prerequisite JVM and all, but yeah, I think we should be able to get this particular part up and running. Okay, so guys, this is how your SAP Cloud Connector works in your SAP CPI
Sam,
as
when
such.
you're connecting, when you're configuring in CPI details, will you
Mhm.
provide the connector details, or you need to provide the
Virtual host,
on-premise?
virtual host detail. That's what I was just telling you, na? That if you have to make a call from SAP CPI, and in if you have done this virtual host mapping to this internal host, and then you have pass virtual. I think there was an option, I hope you have seen, pass virtual host in your request header. Okay, so from CPI, if you have to pass any kind of S4 resource access, you have to pass this virtual host as HTTPS VH colon 8054 SAP BC SRT IDOC, anything like that. Did you get my point?
Yeah.
Okay,
So,
let me
that
save it.
means in SCC, when you're configuring SCC, so internal on-premises details will be provided as the internal host and all these things of the on-premises details, right?
Well, wait, let me just quickly just talk about. See, now let's say we have this SAP Cloud for customer integration with your SAP S4 HANA. Okay, now let me just see if anything is inbound to SAP. So now just think of a case. Now we have this IDOC system as such. Okay, so which is sending a request to S4. Now I'm saying here in the connection, so this is my details. Now this is might be for S4 HANA. So here instead of passing of internal host, you pass here the virtual host detail with the port as such. Okay, because now here we need to provide, because we have done mapping in such a way in our case that this will be mapped with on internal host, but I'm going to pass this as I'll expose this to my CPA consultant and ask that just while hitting a request, give this into your virtual in your request. Okay, so here you can define your virtual host details colon 443 and whatever the path SAP BCS RTI doc. So that will remain the same and only as such here. Are you able to relate now?
Okay. Yeah, yeah, got
Sam,
it.
one question. Sam, one question. After HTTPS forward slash, you have star. Is that like because we have dev, test, and production, so host and port name is marked as a star, or
No. I think here if you just look at here, port is this. Okay.
okay, this is a virtual port, right?
So virtual port. So now in my case, I have to pass like 8054 here, zero
Mhm.
05, and then at this particular place, I am going to park VHS.
Okay.
Okay, so once I click onto this particular part, so this is my virtual host. This remains the same because see, end of the day, you have to understand when a request will go to Cloud Connector, it knows what Cloud Connector has to replace it. So instead of this, once internally within it sets S4, so it will actually pass this bit, and then the resource, if we have an access to our user, so I think he should be able to access or invoke your record or your resource as such here. Now are you able to relate it out? Anyone, in case if any kind of question, you can just ask me up. All good? Should I move it? Should I move on to the next bit?
So at the end of the day, it will go and post an IDOC in S4 system, is it?
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's all about your post request.
Okay.
Okay. So now I'll just do one thing. Again, I think there are a few topics which I need to discuss about. So I think this was about your how does your cloud connector work out. Mujib, you are clear about this? Any question you have?
Yeah, clear.
Okay, good. Okay, so now I will move on to the next part. So we have, I think, two, three topics we have it. So I'll first I'll start with data stores. Data stores and global variables. Okay. So now guys, what exactly is your data stores? Okay, so now again guys, whenever we are working with our integration scenarios, sometime it becomes that your scenario becomes complicated, or might be, now let's say if there are kind of a dependencies between two different I flows. Okay, might be based on one's on one of based on one's output, I want to might be store it, and based on that I want to process some other I flow, I want to store some kind of a key detail as such. In that particular case, what SAP CPI has provided out? SAP CPI has provided a feature which is known as your data store operations, which provides this kind of a control where, with the help of which, you will be able to actually store the data, fetch the data, and delete the data as such in your SAP CPI. Now, how does it actually works into the system? I'll just say quickly: store, read, delete, message, payload in SAP CPI. Guys, I hope you can just hear me out. Hello.
Yeah, we can. I can
Okay, okay, perfect,
do
perfect. Thank you. So now for this particular case, what I'm gonna do here is, so we have different kind of a data store operation which is available. So now just to start with the basic of it is, now let's, in case if I want to store any kind of a message, might be I want to reference it back, because there are so many times there are different kind of use case comes. Now I think after doing it out, because initially when I used to think about this kind of use case, I used to think why someone will store it, why I have to read it, what kind of a data I can read, and how can I read it. Okay, so I think the how word was was very critical for me as such. So again, I think when you do something practically there, I think for you it's easy to relate it out. So first I'll show you how to do this particular use case. Again, I think doing this is not something a rocket science. Again, you can just connect any kind of a input payload here. Store. Okay. And then here you have the option. So if this is for your persistence. So here we have this data store operations available. Again, this is your delete, get, select, and your write. Okay, again, I think with name, it's pretty much tells you what it does. It does. Delete actually deletes the operation with the data store. Get actually get operation with the data store. It gets the data store complete. Good part is select is that you can actually perform select operation what you want to get into from the data store part. Write is all about creating a data store. So once I click on the write part, first we need to write something. That's only we can just then read. So here, first of all, you have to provide a data store name. Okay. Now you can just give any kind of a name. You can just define the dynamic name. You see that we have an option available for defining the name of your data store using your header or your property variable. Okay, so you can just define any name as such for your data store. Again, you can use a specific character. So I'll just say order payload. Okay, I think this is the first part. Now comes to your visibility. What exactly is the visibility of this particular data store? So now let's say if I read some kind of a message payload into this. Now is it the scope is global, the scope is local, or how the scope is? So in this particular case, now let me just keep it global here. Okay, so that any other iFlow wants to access this particular message, so it can actually do that. It just need to have this data store name and the entry ID. Here you can just provide some kind of unique entry ID. So I'll just provide ID underscore the same name. So I'll just take the reference of it also somewhere so that we can actually quickly use it. Now this is how I've defined it. So now again, I think this is an important retention threshold in alerting. I think it's just a 2 days expiration period in days. Again, it's a 30 encrypted stored message. It's just it is check override existing message, include message headers. Okay, so again there are different kind of checks we have enabled. I'll just quickly click on save. Okay, I think it's important on the data part, because you cannot just keep that the data here into the CPI system. You have to be very smart about it till when you need a data and then when you want to clear it. If it's a critical data, I would highly recommend to have a very conservative approach for a data perspective. Let me just quickly click on deploy. I think this is started. So let me just quickly go here. Let me go to the deployment status. Let me go to the navigate manage integration content. So now what will happen is I'm just going to push again a message into this particular endpoint. Okay, I'm just going to submit a request. Okay, so now you see here the message has been completed. Now I'm sure everyone would ask that Sam, where is that particular data store tracked as such here? Okay, so now for to view that particular part, you have to go to this monitor part here. Okay, and monitor you have something called data stores. Once you create a data store automatically, and if you write any kind of if you use the right data store operations automatically, it will get automatically created here into the data stores. So if you look this particular part, so this is your data store which is created. In case if you want to delete it, you can do that particular part. If you want to download it, you can just do that particular part here. Now I would just ask you something just to try at your place. So once you write or do the data store part, what you do is you just tell me if you are able to visualize the data also, which is written here into the data store. Just check in, come back, and just tell me how does it really work or not. So this is one simple use case of writing your data store. So similarly, now I think again I can just talk here only in this particular part. Your iFlow use case can be like first indication flow. You have multiple operation. Okay. Now might be based on your requirement. It can have get, it can have select, it can have your, I think right we have seen, or it can have your delete operation even. So now when I'm just talking about right here, so you know what are the different kind of configuration we have in the right. When I go to the get part here, I go to the processing part. Now let's say in case if you have to do get, so you have to provide a data store name and your entry ID. Okay, so now you know what kind of details you need to pass it here. So this is your data store name, and then here you have your entry ID. So ID underscore order payload. Okay, so this is how you do a get. I think the only bit different here in the select, again data store you have to provide it, no doubt about it. Visibility you have to give it. Number of poll messages. So now let's in case if you have stored list of messages, so now you have to define here what are the number of messages. Now the beauty here is you can even use header and might be property variable to define like, okay, how many messages you want to. Now let's say if order comes with, let's say 1,000 messages, now you have saved somewhere while inbound request comes. Might be what you can do is, might be at a later stage you can actually define the variable, and then you should be able to play with that particular part too. Okay, so that would be about your that would be about how what the number of messages you want to pull. So this is the difference between a get and your select data store. Last part is delete. Again, I think delete is also very straightforward in the processing. You have to give the name of your data store and your entry ID, and then you have to define the visibility. So now let's in case if you want to delete your data store based on the usage of it, then you can easily do that particular part. Because in a cloud-based application, you don't want to have unnecessary data sitting on the cloud applications as such here. Okay, so this is what we have on the data store part. Now guys, just one more thing apart from these data stores. Anyone any kind of a question in data stores?
For example, we have a list of data. Now we are splitting the data into single records. Then we are putting in a data store all these records. Now going forward, so after some operation, so then we for particular ID we are just for example order ID particular ID I want to fetch that data from data store. Is it possible?
Sorry, come again. I missed your last part.
Now, for example, we have list of data, right? We
Okay,
split it into
okay,
the
okay,
records, single record. We put in a
okay.
then
Into a data store. Okay,
going for after doing some operation, for example, we need to get the original structure, original data from this for example particular record. For example, let's say order number 001. I want to fetch that record. So can you achieve
see,
that?
everything is possible. Everything is possible. I think it's all about how smartly you do. So now let's say there are three record comes, and now you split record three and you create a three data store. Okay, now let's say might be you define the data store name based on let's say order number. You split, you save something in header name the order number, and you define data store name with that order name only. Okay, so definitely while pulling it also there you can define, while doing a get or a select of the data store, you can actually do using that header name. So it should be easy for you as such. Okay, so it should be possible for sure. It's all about how do we get a quick workaround to work with it. Okay.
This conference will now be recorded.
So guys, this is how your data store operation works. In case if anyone has any kind of question, let me know. Then I'll just move on to the next part again. I think that's again also simple. Now let's in case if you want to persist any kind of a variable as such, okay? Or in case if you want to persist a value inside your SAP CPI, I think that can be also possible. So here in apart from this data store operation, I think we have persist, okay? And then we have your write variable also, okay? So again, I think we do have these two more features available for the persistence perspective, and I think these are very common use case where we have to store the message packet. Message payload might be for later processing, or a later reference, or might be some kind of a third other iflow. Okay, so now if I just talk about here in this particular case, so now here write variables. If I just click on add again, I think it's a very simple. You just define the name of your global
Sam,
variables. Yeah.
Sam, sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing any screen?
Okay, guys, I'm really sorry. Sorry, guys. I think I was just talking about that whenever we are talking about data store operations. So apart from this data store operation, we have persist and write variable also. Okay. So again, we can just look at what are the different kind of properties we have for this write variables or persist. So if I go here onto the write variables, you know now operation is this. Here, if I go to the processing part, I think we have to define the name, we have to define the type. So now let's in case if you want to write a variable, and again there this kind of option is available. So you know XPath is for reading from an XML. We have header and property, we have an expression, and expression is like your simple language expression or might be constant. Okay. Now let's in case if you want to store any kind of your value, you can do that particular part. Might be now let's say in case you have a use case where you want to store what you want to store I think there are different kind of uses. Might be if you want to sequence it out, or if you want to check in global variable what was the last order number place, something like that. I think you can have this kind of scenarios. So you can define the variable type, data type, value. Again, I think how we have done for header or property variable. I think this checkbox is important because it tells you the scope of this particular variable. So now let's say if this variable can be used in some other iflow, you can just mark as a global. If you want to keep the scope of this particular variable into a local, so you can just keep it unchecked only. So that's how your write variable is defined. Again, I think it's very straightforward. You can just write the values into this particular variable. The only beauty part here is once these variables are created, you will be able to here see into this manage stores also. Okay. Earlier we have seen number range. Today we have seen data store and variables. So once your variable gets created, so it will be actually shown here into the part. Make sure that you have your authorization specifically. Okay, I think you have data stores operation also like read. I think you have roles related to that particular part. Make sure that for systems you have your roles given as per the requirement only. I think now I have this quick example. I've seen this one of the examples. Now let's try in case if we want to see uh, now let's say if there are employees gets replicated from from success factor system to your service cloud system. Now let's say, okay, now let's say in a day I have a like one batch job. Okay, so now whenever I have to schedule my next call, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to take the last time and what time I'm sending it out, current time. So I'm just going to send this as a time parameter so that any record created or changed between this duration, I should be able to fetch it out. So I think this can be one example for keeping some kind of a global variables or the time part here into the CPI application. So this is one of the use cases for your variables here. Persist again, I think persist is, if you look at here, in case if you want to store any message here into the persist, I think you can actually you just have to give the step name as such, enter unique ID for the process step at which your message payload is stored. If you want to click more information, there is always a question mark here. So it just talk about what is a persist message here. Okay, again, procedure is fine, and yes. Now I think this is something interesting. Again, I think they have just provided the API as knowledge in case if they want to read from an external API also. I think this is possible then now. To access and manage stored messages, you can use OData APIs. Okay, I think they have provided it out. So yeah, let me just check on this particular part again. If this is a generic, then definitely what we can do is, I think this will remain the same. Your tenantdetail.com API v1 message processing log, there might be we have to give our message ID and then message store entries. Oh, this is something new. Let me just check and come back. Again, I think all these operations are given you so that you can store data, and then might be at a later stages you can actually play with your messages. So this is about your data stores. Now guys, I think what topics are left, I think which I'm going to cover in next one session. I hope by that time we should be able to finish it out. I think your API management is one for sure. I think in 15 minutes I'll not be able to cover it out, so I'll just keep it for the next week. I'll keep API management, performance, uh, and I think someone asked me for SF connectivity also. Let me just see in case if we can just take that scenario, that particular part. SF connectivity, performance. What else? I think there is a topic related to aggregator. Okay, I think these are the few topics I think would be left out for our last session, which we are going to have next Saturday. Okay, we can just discuss about these cases. I can just check if there's anything else which I see, and then I hope we should be able to close on the course part as such. Okay, cool. So guys, thank you so much for joining today's session. So let's connect again next week and take it forward. Thank you.
Sam, you are not going to discuss on the certificate